Hey everybody, welcome back to Historians of the Movies podcast. I'm your host and creator, Jason Herbert, and every single week we are bringing you discussions on history and film and history and everything else in between. And this week we're talking about Michael Mann's Ferrari, starring Adam Driver and Penelope Cruz and Shailene Woodley. And our guest this week is Colin Colbourn. He is the lead historian over at Project Recovery, and he is also a postdoctoral researcher with the University of Delaware. And we're going to talk this week about the history of Enzo Ferrari, his life, the controversies surrounding his life in the mid-20th century. We're going to talk about Italian racing legends. We're also going to talk about what's good in this movie, what's bad in this movie, and the other movies maybe you should be watching. So sit back and relax, strap yourself in. Ferrari is next on Historians of the Movies podcast. Colin Colbourn, how are you, man?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me on, and how are you?
You know what? I'm great. This is awesome because this is like literally we were just talking. This is our first conversation we've ever actually had. We are both friends of the wonderful, amazing Sarah Myers,
the one and only.
Oh, dude, she's awesome. I just love her to death. I saw her in person the last time in Philadelphia, like in 2023, and that was the only good thing I had to say about Philadelphia. Philadelphia has become dead to me. I don't know. Philly's fine, I guess. I don't know. So where are you? You were just saying before we started recording how dry it is where you are. Where are you?
I mean, I'm not in a particularly dry place. It's just the weather's crazy right now. I'm in Northern Virginia. I'm in Leesburg, Virginia, outside of D.C., sort of on the verge of West Virginia. But it's cold. I mean, unusually cold here. So.
How do we, in 2024, have a town called Leesburg in Northern Virginia?
It's actually not named after Robert E. Lee, believe it or not.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
An ancestor of Robert E. Lee, but not the Robert E. Lee. So now, does anyone know that in this town? Probably not. Probably not. No. But
so I'm from Western Kentucky, and there's actually a statue of Robert E. Lee on my courthouse square to this day. In the
Good work.
Yeah, and of course, there's the movement to remove all the stuff, and of course, people back home are like, "You can't do that. It's history." I'm like, "Oh, it's in those books you're not reading."
That's right.
Like, it's important. I'm like, actually, what it was as important was when the Daughters of the Confederacy erected this statue and pointed it directly at the historically black portion of the town. Oof. That was what was important to them. Like, now let's go ahead and just take it down, just a little bit.
Fortunately here, we're actually lucky. We're going in kind of the opposite direction. They recently modified a monument outside of the courthouse that had the war dead from the county from World War I believe. And they added in, because it had not been done before, they added in African Americans who died as well. And so we're actually moving. I feel like we're doing well, man, over here. We're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that's just not going to happen in Kentucky. My people are, they're a special, I love them. I mean, I do, but oh my God. Every time I go home, I'm like, it's like going back in time it's the reason why I became a historian. You know, it's like, someone is listening back home, like, let's talk to him no more. I'm like, listen, I'm not coming back. You're not talking to me to begin with. It's fine. I'll see you on Facebook in your 7th divorce. You know, it's okay. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm from a small town, a manufacturing town in northern Indiana, and it is a special place, and it grounds me when I go back home and sort of, get out of this sort of DC East Coast living and go back home. And it also sort of helps me connect with how a lot of America's feeling at the time too. And sort of, so I try to keep that, when I'm going back home, but I run back here every time.
All right. You're from Indiana. My dad was from Indiana. He's actually from Evansville. So due south of you, right?
That's right.
For the longest time, I refused to listen to Mellencamp. Or anything else, like even acknowledge Indiana's, like where are you on the Indiana spectrum? Like, are you a pro Hoosier State kind of guy? Like, how do you feel about the homeland? How much time do we have?
Yeah, no. This is a great, complicated question. I love being from the Midwest. I feel like a true Midwesterner. I went to graduate school in the South in southern Mississippi. And so when I was down there, I really felt different, like I really could feel that sort of when you're sort of in the Midwest all the time, you're sort of like, oh, everyone's the same. But you get down to the South and you're like, oh, okay, things are a little bit different. At the same time, I've disconnected a lot with that town, and it is what it is. But I'm proud. I wear like an Indiana T-shirt every once in a while because I came from there. And hey, like my wife and I are both from the same town in Indiana. We both grew up, went to the same high school and everything like that. Went to college in Indiana, and even though a lot of things, I'm not so proud of, I still rep it. You never know. Those of us from Indiana who are, all over the country, we're doing good things usually.
I feel like this is in fact a Mellencamp song. Like there's enough there. Like I feel like like I was in the gym earlier today and they were actually playing Mellencamp over the loudspeakers. I was like, well, this isn't as bad as the country music they had on. And I like country music, but not when I'm trying to like channel anger and remorse and self-doubt into a lift. But yeah, so I'm like, I was listening to Small Town today. It's like, all right, I guess this is gonna. Oh, fuck it. I mean,
look, I'm not really a Mellencamp guy either.
No, so I'm not either. But and I feel the exact same way, right? Because I come from the South, Kentucky, Louisiana, Tennessee, and then I went to graduate school in Minnesota. Which
we went opposite directions,
dude. And it was so weird because people in Minnesota would talk to me about the South, and I've always had this experience, and I don't know if this was like this when you were in Mississippi. People talk about the South like it's this whole other place, like this whole other country. And
I'm going to say this out loud. When I got into graduate school at Southern Mississippi. And I had already met the great professors, Mike Nyberg, Andy Weiss, these guys I was going down to study with, and I was really excited. But one thing hung in my brain as someone who had never been in the South. I was like, do they have air conditioning down there? Like, am I going to die from heat exhaustion? And of course, I went and moved there and found out that they have the best air conditioning in the world down in the South. And so I learned a lot. And I enjoyed it, and the folks I went to school with at Southern Miss were great, so it was a good experience.
No, it's good. The food down there is great. I got a great friend of mine, Lauren Lesab Shepard, who's from Southern Mississippi as well. So she'll post pictures of food, and it's just nothing but like this and grits and just like awesome. And I lived in Kansas for 5 years, where they have yet to discover salt, let alone food. Yeah. So that's it was.
No, I mean Southern Miss is great because you're in this hub where you're like, it is the South, it is molasses and barbecue and all that good stuff. But also you are, stone's throw from New Orleans, and that entire world, which is its sort of own little world, is right there at your fingertips. And so it was, Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I don't think I'd live there for forever, but I really enjoyed, sort of being down there and experiencing it for sure.
Don't you feel like New Orleans is almost like the Chicago of the South? Because there's the South, and then like New Orleans is this whole other space that's just like amplified. Like I don't know. It's there's the South, and then there's New Orleans. There's Illinois and Chicago. Like I don't know.
Yeah, in a way, it feels that way. Having grown up sort of outside of Chicago.
Right.
To me, Chicago is the place where all of us who lived in Indiana go to work. And that is sort of what Chicago is to me. It's all of it is sort of the epitome of the Midwest. But to your point, I think New Orleans, on the other hand, is this weird gem in the South that is not like any other part of the South. It is completely unique for all the better or worse or all of those things. And so I definitely see what you're saying, but to me, New Orleans sticks out as just this really special place.
Doesn't New Orleans still feel like when we think about like the Atlantic world, it still feels like an Atlantic city versus like the South? It's so rich when it comes to like these different cultures. I mean, it's gumbo. It's something else. It is.
It does.
It's
I
hard to
mean,
explain it.
it feels like the Caribbean. It sort of
Yeah.
came to the South, in my opinion, and it's like Europe and the Caribbean sort of clashed together there and melded in some ways and contrasted in other ways. I went to Miami for the first time ever. I've never even been to Miami. I've been to places all over the world, but I had never been to Miami. Went there in July. It was as hot as you would expect it to be, but it also felt like Latin America. Like it felt like being in a whole different world. It was much cooler than I was expecting. Very hot, very, very hot, but otherwise it was great.
My favorite part of Miami is just that it's that much closer to the Keys. So I could like if I'm like busting down I-95, Miami's on the left, and I'm headed to like Key Largo as fast
Yeah.
as I possibly can. I've got like Jack Johnson and Jimmy Buffett just blaring, and I'm just already zoning the fuck out. So, all right, people are like, "Are you going to talk about the movie?" I don't know. Colin.
Do we need to talk about the movie?
Wanna forget about it. Like, this is Jason's house of Italian stuff now. It's gonna be
All right.
This is gonna be awful. Colin, before we jump into Ferrari, why don't we now that you're here, why don't we introduce you? Let you introduce yourself to our audience. Who are you? Where are you from? All over, and go from there.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, from Northern Indiana, I went to grad school at Southern Mississippi, and I, studied military history. Specifically, I was working on how the Marine Corps created a public image for itself in order to survive in a military system that wanted to kill it all the time. And so, which has some interesting ties to Ferrari that we will find out once we start getting into the movie here.
Oh, a driving tie, perhaps. Yes, but go
Right.
on.
However, when I was in college, my grandfather sent me Clive Cussler books all the time, and I had this sense of I always wanted to do something that had to do with scuba diving. And sort of when I was in college, I was either going to be an underwater archaeologist or a military historian, and I went the military history route. But I did get a whole bunch of scuba certifications, and so as I was in graduate school, in those years where you're past your comps and you're like, do I just stay here, do the dissertation? Do I try to get a job, see what happens? I saw that there was a place it's called the DPAA, the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency. And I saw that they were based in Hawaii. I saw that they searched the world for our military service members who went missing in action. And I still have the email to this day. I sent an email to Andy Weiss, and I said, I am going to get this fellowship. So fortunately, I did it.
I'm like, why aren't we talking about Sahara right now? But go on.
Dude, next episode. I'm all about Sahara. Yeah, so I got a fellowship at DPAA, and instead of sending me to Hawaii, they sent me to Omaha, Nebraska, which is where they had set up a new lab there. But that's how I got the bug in order to solve these mysteries from World War II about these guys who went missing in action. I did my fellowship there. I worked at West Point after that with building their it's actually at a technology company working with West Point to build their history of military art textbook. And as that project was winding down, I saw that there was a nonprofit that was standing up that was doing the same work that DPAA was doing, searching the world for MIAs. And I saw that they needed a scuba diving historian. And so it's called Project Recover. And I've been there. We're going into my almost 8th year now at Project Recover, and have since also Project Recover has two partners. It's Scripps Institution of Oceanography and the University of Delaware. So I went over to the UD side. I teach there as an adjunct, a sort of a part-time thing there, and I'm a postdoc in the School of Marine Science with them as well. So all this laboring on to say Project Recover, our specialty is that we use underwater robots, autonomous underwater vehicles, to search the seafloor specifically for aircraft that went down. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, we've searched for aircraft all the way up through the Gulf War, actually, and that is our focus. So my job as the historian is to go into the archives, talk to family members, and try to find cases that are going to be searchable on our side. And so that's what I do with Project Recover, and it's been a crazy experience scuba diving on B-17 wrecks and stomping through the jungles, and it's been a wild ride for a historian for sure. So I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep doing this while I still can.
Yeah, I feel like right now I'm talking to you. I'm like, okay, so Colin has the coolest job I've ever heard of in my life. And I'm like, all right, this man was built by another civilization to save the humanities. Because right now what I need for you to do is get in front of every person possible that controls university funding. Be like, no, we do cool shit. Like this shit's fucking awesome. Dude, that is okay, that's amazing. We're gonna have to jump into so much of this, and please always come back to this podcast after this because holy crap, I have a billion questions. So we got introduced by our mutual friend Sarah Myers, who's been on the podcast before. Brilliant, amazing scholar, and she's also a fan of racing. I came to her, I was like, "Hey, Ferrari's coming out. Do you want to do a pod?" She's like, "I'm wrapped up." She's like, "But I got a dude." She's like, I got this friend Colin. I'm like, "Sarah, you don't have other friends?" She's like, "I do." And I was like, all right, I'll take your word for it. And she's like, Colin's my guy. So what's it with you and racing? Like, you grew up in Indiana. Is it because of the Indianapolis connection? Like, what's going on there?
Man, I wish I could tell you it was the Indiana connection. I really do. In fact, Sarah is an amazing person. She deserves all the shout outs in this podcast for sure. Her and I did a paper together back when I think we were master's students, like way back in the day. And that's how we sort of got connected. I think it was an SMH paper. We did a panel together. And I don't think I really saw her or talked to her much after that. Maybe, you see people at conferences every year. And then in 2021, I'm down in Austin at the F1 race because I had become a mega fan of Formula One. And I'm scrolling through my Instagram and I see she is also at the same race. And so I was like, whoa, two historians at the same place. Let's say what's up. So we met up and that's sort of where we rekindled our friendship again. And then she lives only about like 2 hours north of me in Pennsylvania. And so we've been having her come down. My wife and I will host these like Formula One parties and just come down and watch races. Cause Formula One races here in the US are usually at like 7 a.m. So we usually have them come down on Saturday night and watch the race for breakfast and stuff. But, so that's how racing brought us here. Now, so for me, you're going to have a lot of comments on this video that I'm a fake. So let's just start this off right here.
Good, because that's what this podcast does. People are like, Jason, you're not a historian. I'm like, I'd never claimed to be. But
I told you when we were talking about watching this movie, I told you that my best friend was a Ferrari fan. My best friend, Nick, grew up in a town called Speedway, Indiana. And you better believe that town is called Speedway, Indiana, because it is under turn 2 of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And so he has lived and breathed motor racing. He's always tried to get me into it. And I've always been like, I don't care. It's not interesting to me. I'm not, sorry. And then the pandemic happened and I'm watching every Netflix show, binging every Netflix show that I can find. And they have this show called Drive to Survive, which follows around, the first couple seasons followed around basically the back marker, the middle marker teams of Formula One and gave you the storylines of the season and what Formula One was and how it worked. I binged, I don't know how many seasons there were up to that point, 3 seasons. And I became totally obsessed, started watching Formula One. My best friend, my brother and I both went on a F1 TV subscription. So I'll be like up at night watching races from 1987, just sort of like, what's the narrative from this season and, like what happened here. And it just so happened that 2021 was one of the greatest Formula One seasons of all time. It went down to the last race to decide the world championship. It was one of the coolest, most epic seasons of sport I've ever witnessed, in my opinion. I've actually stopped watching other sports. I only watch Formula One now. And so that's probably why Sarah has brought you to me and to discuss Ferrari, which turned out not to have a whole lot to do with Formula One after all, but that's all right.
Yeah, not so much, right? And let's just jump into it. So for people listening in, we'll talk early on about some non-spoilery stuff, and then we'll jump into the spoiler stuff. I guess is maybe it's like we can talk like maybe Colin, maybe your first initial impressions of the film. Because were you excited when you heard this movie was coming out? What was your general thoughts?
So excited because as I was also binge watching Formula One, I was watching other racing movies.
Oh, sure.
I still don't think there are a lot of really good racing movies out there. There's some classics. Certainly Ford versus Ferrari, I think, is one of the best ones that is out there. And so I was expecting a racing movie when this came out. And so initial impressions, not my favorite movie. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and say that I did not like this movie at all.
This is a really uneven film.
It's a really uneven film. It is a very Michael Mann film, but Michael Mann's got so many great films. So it's about a very troubled and complicated individual more than the cars and the brand and all these other things. So that's, to me, and it also, I've got so much to say about it, but it also just left so many things hanging out there without having a solution, which I'm not. I have a lot of my best friends from college are film, theater. They understand the art of these things a lot better than I do, and maybe they did not like it either to start off with, but I saw critics that said that it was good, but it was, in my opinion, not worth going to see.
Yeah. Okay. So Mann is probably my favorite director right now.
Really?
Probably, but that's really on the strength of Heat, which is probably my number 6 favorite film of all time. We just watched it on HATM at the turn of the year. I'm
awesome.
reading Heat 2 right now. I actually love Miami Vice, the remake of Miami Vice with Colin Farrell.
Wow. Okay.
I think it's actually really good. I mean, it's not perfect.
I haven't seen it. I honestly haven't seen it.
It's good, and then Collateral's amazing.
Sure.
So he's made, but he hasn't made a movie. I was looking at this today. Michael Mann hadn't made a movie in 8 years before this film. His last film was Black Hat.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, which again, not a great film. It was really just kind of missed on a lot of spots, right?
Right.
So I don't know, man. Like my general thoughts on this was like, I love Adam Driver. I think he's actually the best actor of his generation right now.
By the way, Adam Driver is from my area in northern Indiana.
Are you shitting me?
Yeah. He's from Mishawaka.
And a former Marine, right? Which we got to get into.
Yeah.
And he's also going to be Neil McCauley in the prequel sequel to Heat, in Heat 2, the film.
That's awesome. I like Adam Driver. I like Adam Driver a lot. I like Penelope Cruz a lot. Honestly, I thought she did spectacular in this movie, and maybe even was the only thing that was worth watching outside of Adam Driver in this film. So the acting, for the most part, was great. I had no problem with that.
Yeah, it's like you've got a bunch of individual performances that don't really stack up to a movie. I mean, It's a movie, but it's... Right. I don't know, man. Just kind of, this movie felt like it just kind of left me wanting. But we can jump into the specifics on that here in a bit. All right, let's talk about this because this whole thing is built around this movie catches us. I think late 50s. Was it 56? Is this movie
57?
57. Excuse me. And it catches us at a tenuous time in Enzo Ferrari's career. Right, the company is teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. And this is
supposedly.
I can't talk about this movie without thinking about Ford versus Ferrari, which is a superior film, and I wasn't expecting for it to be for it to work out that way because I thought for certain because I think James Mangold is a good, not great director, and I thought this would be an even better film, but it wasn't.
It should have been. It should have been the whole way through. It had the actors. It had Ford versus Ferrari had obviously amazing actors too, but it should have at least been as good. And honestly, the subject, Enzo Ferrari and Ferrari itself deserve an epic movie. I mean, they really do.
Yeah, like I want to watch a 3-hour Godfather movie on Enzo's, but this it felt like the race was like kind of shoehorned in over here. Like everything was like building to this big race, and then we didn't really have a race. I don't know. All right, so the film opens up 57. Ferrari's like, what's going on? Are you familiar with like what's going on in Ferrari's life, or as far as what's going on in racing itself? In the mid 50s.
Yeah. So this is where it frustrates me again, partially because in the 50s, Ferrari is a great car manufacturer. They had won the Mille Miglia in the past 2 years or something like that, or past year. They won it the last year. But before that, Mercedes was dominating. After Mercedes had sort of gathered itself out of the rubble of World War II, recreated its entire program. And in 1955, they won and set a record at the Mille Miglia that was never beaten. But then, I don't know if you know this, but like in 1955, during the Le Mans, the 24 hours of Le Mans, a Mercedes car, very similar to this story, veered off into the grandstand.
Oh my God.
And killed 87 people. And Mercedes ended their motorsports program completely after that. And they didn't come back until, 2000, 2000, something like that. 2000.
They killed the program for half a century?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's understandable, right?
It was all caught on film. It was brutal. And this is 2 years before what we're talking about, which kind of seems like a small incident compared to when you think
only 9 small Italian children died.
Only 9 children killed. Come on.
Spoiler. For those of you unaware, I always feel weird about doing spoilers on history films. I'm like, it happened. But go on.
No, and so the 1950s. So Enzo is sort of this guy who is, this is my connection to Marines. He knows how to build and define a brand and a public image for a brand. That is what makes Ferrari what it is. And that's what makes Ferrari the only constructor that's been racing. Of course, Mille Miglia is not Formula One. That's actually like supercars and endurance racing. But still, they're the only constructor that's been in for the entire run. He is also a really great motivator of people. But like most of his career was under the shadow of these other car makers, Alfa Romeo, Fiat, these other major car manufacturers. And he just sort of, was building his own. He was really good at collecting drivers. That was really his thing, was collecting drivers, which Michael Mann, really focuses in on how much it haunted him that two of his buddies, died in earlier crashes, and he had lost lots of race car drivers. Obviously, back then, safety was of zero importance whatsoever.
There's a lot of dudes flying through the air in a non-Marvel film.
No kidding. If only they could have gotten the VFX people from the Marvel films to do this. That's really the
yeah.
So to get us to the 50s, he actually served in World War One. He got the flu. His father and brother both died of Spanish flu. He got the flu, survived, but was taken out of the military. He worked for Alfa Romeo for a long time and built a sort of a factory at Modena, this Ferrari factory, which was then bombed during World War II, which was really fascinating because I think, and I apologize, I really meant to, this upcoming trip I have has distracted me, but I wanted to find the action reports from bombing of Modena, Italy, because I am sure that I could find either like aerial photos of them bombing it and like which bomb groups bombed Ferrari in World War II. I just think that would be very interesting to see.
Was Ferrari making parts? Were they manufacturing stuff for the war effort? I'm assuming.
Yes. They were making these like they're called Jung devices, Jung devices, which milled ball bearings, and which is, obviously, if you know anything about sort of our targets in World War II, we loved going after ball bearing factories because we had this theory that if we murdered all the ball bearings, Germany could not continue the war effort. And so they obviously went after Modena as well. And it's actually really hard to figure out exactly what Enzo's doing during the war. I haven't read all the books on Enzo, but as I was doing some research on him, I found that they were selling, they got a patent from Germany to make these things. They made them better than the Germans did. So the Germans actually started buying from Italy, the ones that Ferrari were making. I also saw somewhere that he made a lot of money off of that. I also saw somewhere that he was helping partisans in Italy do something, and that there were assassination attempts on his life. But all of it was very positive in his direction. And as we know, he's such a good brand manager. I don't know if that's just Ferrari sort of sugarcoating things,
Now we're assuming these assassination attempts were not because he was sleeping around with his wife at that point.
Sleeping. I mean, he's probably sleeping around on his mistresses with other mistresses.
I had the hardest time watching this film because I'm like, how are you going to sleep around on Penelope Cruz? This is just not. If there was a problem with casting Penelope Cruz, I'm like, no one's sleeping around on Penelope Cruz. No, it's not happening.
No, she is one of my favorites. I have to absolutely agree with you on that.
She's really good in this.
Absolutely.
I think it's the best I've ever seen her in a film. She's really, the heartbreak is there.
Yes, they make me feel sad and stressed out just by looking at her. All thing you have to do is look at an image of Penelope Cruz in this movie, and the circles underneath her eyes. Right. I mean, it goes down to her lips almost. It's crazy.
Right. Well, here's a woman who has witnessed the death of her child.
Yep.
Living through what is, if not a loveless marriage, a marriage that has been crippled by time, by Enzo's drive. Pardon the pun, for his own business and things like it. It's this weird partnership. There's clearly still a spark, at least portrayed on the film, but
right.
Boy, she's just really. She may be better than Driver in this movie, and Driver's amazing. He's really good. She's phenomenal.
Adam Driver's great. I think he's good in this movie. I think the look they give him is fantastic. I think that all of that is good. Well, maybe you disagree, but I think Penelope is the better of the two in this film by far. And I'm sorry, Shailene Woodley. Sorry about that.
You weren't a fan of Shailene Woodley?
Not in this, no.
Felt like her accent was all over the place, but what do I know about
felt like felt like she was an Italian that came from California and maintained the accent.
Felt like that, right? You mentioned that, actually. So I kept thinking about. I don't know if you've seen Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman, but when I was watching this film, I was like, "Holy shit! This is the most fashionable film." Adam Driver is dressed to the nines at all times, and I don't know if that was just a thing that Enzo did himself, but he was always hyper stylized.
I have several notes that I wrote in a completely dark movie theater. And I was literally just writing, hoping I wasn't just writing the same thing on top of it, just writing on top of the words I wrote every single time. I didn't write a whole lot for this movie, but one of the things I wrote is great pants. I mean, the costumes are amazing. I mean, I love it. It's everything's so sharp.
His hair looks good too. I was like, I could also be gray hair. And then I went back and looked at pictures of what Enzo Ferrari actually looked like, and I thought they really did Enzo Ferrari a solid with the casting of Adam Driver in this film.
They didn't make him nearly as portly as they probably should have.
It's like casting Jason Herbert by hiring, Matthew McConaughey or something like that. It's like they would do okay, He's a human. That's about as close as it gets, right?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. But I think that also fits in. I think that fits in with this thing about all about the public image. Mm-hmm. It's him moving the model off of the badge on the Ferrari. He moves her over so they can see the badge. And because building a brand, this is exactly what I argue about the Marine Corps. When you build that brand, it has lasting power that will get you beyond all the drama, beyond killing 9 Italian kids and doing all these other things. And it makes a lasting impression on people, so that Ferrari is much bigger than just Enzo Ferrari. It is a lasting brand. And that's what the Marine Corps did. That's what I argue that they did. And you can see Michael Mann doing a very good job of sort of showing how he's thinking about that here.
Yeah, actually, I want to sidebar into this Marine Corps thing because I think I don't, unlike the film, I don't want to leave this hanging. Because I want to see if I'm accurate on this. Because when I think about Marine Corps, the first thing I think about in my mind, and I know a few of my friends are former Marines, and I hope what I say sounds respectful because I really don't want to get my ass kicked. I think of just impossibly tough dudes and women. Like of the American armed forces, like you think about the toughest guys and women, it's always Marines. That's at least that's in my mind's eye. And I think about them storming beaches in World War II, even though I recently learned there was actually more, the Army actually took more beaches in World War II in the Pacific. Is that correct?
I wouldn't know that. I don't know. I don't know if it's more beaches. I mean, certainly in the Pacific, the Marine Corps had 6 divisions. The Army had, I think, 36 divisions in the Pacific. So certainly by the amount that the Army and Navy did in the Pacific, the Marine Corps
Yeah,
probably
they
should
did
have
more
been.
landings or something.
Yeah, Marine Corps probably should have been a footnote, but again, this is what I looked into is how they were manipulating news coming out. They were not lying by any stretch, but they were working with newsrooms. Newsrooms need to sort of fill their newspapers, and Marines were just saying, "Hey, here's a cool story about a Marine. Here's a cool story about a Marine from your area," and so
About Basilone?
yeah. So rather than think about what the most news that you get about individuals in World War II on a local level is either they graduated from something or they died. Graduated, transferred, died. This is the kind of sort of local information that you get during World War II in a newspaper. The Marine Corps is sending out stories. They're sending out, from a foxhole in Guadalcanal, your son from Elkhart, Indiana, is, befriended a small goat. Like it's just usually it's quirky things. I mean, of course, in World War I, the Marines really bought into masculinity and the first to fight and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of what they did, even though, they hone it over time and it becomes this tip of the spear, this earned, not given, all this kind of stuff comes. But what they do is they saturate the public with news, with the Marine Corps' name, and in a good way, so that when people think about, the Marines, they're thinking, oh, this is a very important service doing very important things. And that's how they stuck through the reunification after the war, in my opinion.
Was there an attempt to get rid of the Marines after the war?
Oh yeah. Oh, a big, yeah. I mean, the Marines, of course, said that there's 487 attempts to get rid of the Marines. I forget what it is. They say like every 5 years or something. 1909, the Secretary of the Navy, was it Roosevelt? I can't remember, but someone just wrote the Marines out of the budget. He said, "Whoops, you're gone." And interestingly, Smedley Butler's father, Thomas Butler, was a congressman at the time, and he fought tooth and nail to get that done. Taken off the rolls and get them back in service. And then after World War II, of course, as the drawdown's happening, big reunifications, the Air Force is getting its own stuff, and they're like, the Marine Corps. Because think about the Royal Marines, right? The Royal Marines just became sort of an artillery regiment in the Army for a long time. And that's really sort of what they tried to do with the Marine Corps in the 20th century is say, okay, why don't you just be sort of like the landing boat guys, but you'll be a part of the Navy, but you'll be special. But the Marines said, no, we want to fly planes too. And it's not like your planes are going to be our planes. And then, so they were able to beat it. And so, think about the flag raising on Iwo Jima and how that lasting image of sort of Marines conquering the Pacific, and how that was used as iconography through the 7th War Loan Drive and after the war as the monuments being built, and then people are saying, let's get rid of the Marines. I mean, you can see how well they did to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah, I can't imagine. That's amazing because I can't imagine the Marines going anywhere ever because they're so, in my mind, entrenched. No, those are the dudes to go through the door. They're tough. I mean,
yeah, right,
this is my disclaimer. Living 35 miles away from the Air Force Academy, all of our armed forces are tough.
Yeah, that's right.
I haven't made my judgment on Space Command yet, but Space Force,
Yeah.
someone out there is going to get a fuck it. You know what? I don't need Space Force. I'm sorry, but that's fine.
It's a great sitcom. That's for sure. The Steve Carell show is amazing. I know that much.
Oh, Carell's great. Maybe they should have cast Carell actually, as Enzo Ferrari. What happens with this film? So, all right,
so,
you know what? Let's just spoil the show, this film at this point in time. If you're listening now, and if you're still there right now, we've got all the Marine fans are here right now. Everybody else is like,
Hoorah.
yeah, rest of my like, I'm a Navy. All right, so let's talk about Ferrari himself. He's this incredibly complicated dude, right? He's living. I had no idea about any of this. I went completely in blind. I knew that because they cast Shailene Woodley, there was like a thing. I didn't know he had another kid, like with her and all this kind of stuff. Like,
No, I mean, honestly, that wasn't. They didn't talk about that in the reruns of races that I watched. They didn't mention any of that stuff, so I didn't know either. It was a learning. I mean, I knew about the mistresses, I knew that kind of stuff, but I didn't know the guy who currently is the majority owner of Ferrari was an illegitimate son, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly, right. Because the closing credits, like Piero ends up with his name, I guess, many years later.
Yeah, after she died, so his wife sort of made this statement that, like, she had a bunch of or 50% or more than 50% of the company,
yeah.
And she was like, I will relinquish this back to you so long as you never name him the illegitimate son, Piero. I guess you couldn't call him an illegitimate son. It's not really nice.
Yeah.
If you cannot name Piero a Ferrari until I die or until after I'm dead. And then she died, and he immediately put Ferrari on his last name, and then he ended up with the company.
I feel like you said illegitimate son, and we just need to go back to bastard child of Enzo Ferrari. I feel like that's a much better. Can we just bring bastard child back instead of illegitimate? It's like I can fit it better into a tweet. It works better. It's less syllables. I was like, it's fine. And of course, she does him a favor of dying much earlier. So there's that. Everyone wins.
I haven't watched enough Game of Thrones. I need to get back into the Game of Thrones language and just sort of and go that route for sure.
Since since this pod is already veering wildly off course, I got to give you my Game of Thrones hot take, which is, I think, did you ever watch Black Sails?
Oh no, I didn't. I actually during the pandemic wanted to start it and I never did.
Black Sails. Here's my hot take. Black Sails is the better series. They come out. They're about the same time as Game of Thrones. It's shorter. It's 4 seasons long, but it's capped. I'm telling you. Hear me out. Game of Thrones is better on the single watch. It's on the single watching through until the final season, which goes. I don't know how you end up with Jon Snow not on the. Whatever. Okay, I don't want to ruin things.
No, I totally agree with you. I'll have to watch Black Sails. Yeah, I'll have to watch that.
Well, it's a precursor to Treasure Island. It's the prequel. So it's hitting in the golden age of piracy in like 1715 in the Bahamas and Jamaica. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. If you can make it through the first season, which is a little slow, because
that's always the case, right? It's always the case. It's always
well, if you watch Parks and Rec,
oh yeah,
first season completely unnecessary, except for they have to introduce everybody, right?
That's true.
And that's how we like this film. This is the first season of actually Ford versus Ferrari.
I've got 36 hours of flying coming up, so I'm going to download. I'm looking for shows, and I'm going to download Black Sails on your recommendation.
If you do it, like I said, the first season is a little slow because they got to introduce everybody. Second through fourth season, some of the best television I've ever seen. I'll die on a sack of Bibles on this.
I love it.
Yeah. All right. Let's. What do you like about this movie? When we talk about what do you like about anything, Colin? What do you like about this film? You and I are both giantly meh on this film. Yep. Let's do the Italian compliment sandwich. What do we like about this movie?
I like some parts of the movie. I thought the beginning because again, I come from a manufacturing town. We build like 80% of all RVs in the United States, right? So it's one town built around one thing. And that is very much like Modena in this movie. And they have at the beginning, they have this whole thing where it's like they're all in church. And but at the same time, they're testing one of his new cars. But in order for him to be able to hear it, they fire a gun on the test. And when the test starts, they fire the gun. And then everyone at church hits their stopwatch and watches their watch. That was probably my favorite part of the movie. When that was happening, I was like, this movie is going to be so good. Like, I can already tell that this movie is going to be so good. And then all of a sudden, none of that gets resolved. What was the time for? Did someone beat that time? What was the car? They didn't even talk about the car, like, individually. So that part I really liked of the movie. Obviously, sort of the tension of the Mille Miglia was good, and some of the racing was good. The part where he's sitting down at dinner with his racers, and he's basically like, you have to be willing to die in order to, do this race, or you're not going to be one of my drivers. That was cool. That sort of shows how powerful he was as a motivator of men, for his drivers. So that, for me, caps off the good parts of the movie, in my opinion.
I totally get you on the scenes where, like, I didn't know Enzo would sit there and have like family meal with his drivers, right? And yeah. I always feel like Michael Mann was like, just let him cook. It was just felt like what he was. Just let Adam Driver do Adam Driver things,
which is great.
Yeah, it's amazing. I remember I watched like the first season of Girls years ago, whenever it first came out, and I never would have thought this kind of a weird. I thought Driver was kind of a weird looking guy. I mean. Unconventionally handsome is probably the way people would probably say.
People say it about me,
right?
So
so that's why we can reckon with this guy. He needs a beard, obviously.
Maybe they say illegitimately handsome. I don't know.
Bastardly handsome, sir. He's a bastardly handsome bastard. And he does act like a bit of like so. Those scenes, I really, Doug. And we said earlier the Penelope Cruz stuff. Like, I think every time she's on screen, she's
totally agree.
And the whole thing at the end where she's like, she's taking the money out and she's like, yeah, I'm saving your ass with this money is what I'm actually doing.
Right. Yeah.
And then there turns out to be this huge drama afterwards about like, I didn't know about the fallout from this race takes years and he nearly loses the company. There's a whole story here that we don't ever see.
I know, exactly. And we don't know how it ends up. I mean, unless you've watched Ford versus Ferrari, then you do kind of know how it
And then we know he's a bad guy again. No, they were like, ha-ha, Yeah. It's so weird. We're rooting for this guy here, and then later on, in like 10 years, he's on top. He's on top of the world again, apparently. And Ford's got to take him down.
You end this movie, and you're like, so did he? Because the whole tension of the movie, for those of you that are not going to watch it, because I wouldn't personally recommend.
Right.
The whole tension of the movie is that they're having bad times. They're supposedly Maserati's doing better, which doesn't make sense because they won the Mille Miglia. Ferrari won the last year, so I don't know why. But supposedly Maserati's doing better than them, and they're going to be going bankrupt, and they're not doing well. And so he might have to sell to basically Alfa Romeo or Fiat, the two sort of bigger companies, which he's worked under in the past. And then if you watch Ford versus Ferrari, he sells to in the future anyway. But that is sort of the big tension of the movie, is that he may have to sell, the company. And yet we don't find out at the end whether that even happens. It wasn't even like a thing that said, and then he sold to, it's just like, what's the story? Where is the story here?
Is Maserati supposed to be the big bad in this film? Because there's really there's really nothing to push back against in this film, right? Traditionally, you've got to have an antagonist, but it's really just like Enzo is conflicted over his family, right? Yeah, it's like his drivers keep dying. We don't have a seatbelt. So
yeah, and it's not even like he's a Tony Soprano or a Walter White character where you love to hate him, and he's just kind of a character that's not really a likable person. And you really just kind of end up feeling bad for Penelope Cruz and Shailene Woodley as well. Her character, you're just kind of like, oh, sorry about that. And then I think one of the things, in my opinion, because I'm such a film genius, one of the things I think would have made this movie better is if we had really gotten to know if the drivers were a real character in this film.
Thank you. Absolutely right.
Like, I don't feel anything for De Portago if I don't know anything about the guy. I know that he dates a model. That's all I know.
Okay, so all right, so here's the thing with the Dave Portago dude, right? So if you're listening in, again, we're just spoiling the show. This thing, there's this weird thing with Dempsey too, because I want to get to the Dempsey thing as well, because Dempsey really kind of threw me off.
Yeah, same.
I kind of felt like, okay, Dave Portago, he's going to be our hero that does the thing. I didn't know what happens to Dave Portago watching this film early on. Apparently, there's the famous kiss between him and his girlfriend. It's the kiss of death,
Right.
is what the Italians call it now, right? Right. They take a picture of it and so forth. So, if you know this backstory, the first time your relationship to that character when you see this, if you know that story, is radically different than what I have, which is like, oh, here's this. But they never develop him either.
Even if I feel like Jason, I feel like even if you knew who he was, it doesn't. I don't think it builds anything, right? I don't feel any sense of. In fact, I don't feel any sense of loss when Dave Portago dies and accidentally kills 9 Italian children. But at the same time, I don't feel like Enzo cares either. And it's just sort of like, I don't know. It feels like they didn't really want you to care that much. They wanted you to be more concerned about Enzo and the trial and whether it was his fault or not, and the future of Ferrari. That's way more important than this character. And so all you get is just sort of Enzo's side of it, I guess. I don't know.
Here's the frustrating thing, though. This movie is like 2 hours and 11 minutes long, so it's not as long as it felt. The pacing was really weird on this film. It felt like it took a lot longer than 2. Like, I was thinking, I just went back and checked to see how long it was. I thought it was like 2 hours and 40, because this movie feels like it's fucking forever, right?
Yeah, I just watched Oppenheimer last night, and this movie felt a lot longer than Oppenheimer.
Well, Christopher Nolan knows how to pace a film, and man traditionally does too.
Yeah, that was an actual spectacular biopic. I mean, if we're honest.
Have you seen Godzilla -1 yet?
No, not yet. I absolutely have to. I have to.
That is the World War II film to watch. Oppenheimer's the best film of last year. Yeah. Somehow I like Godzilla -1 even more, just because.
Oh, I believe
you see this whole. It's just stunning in what you go through, especially as an American. 70 years removed from this, and just for me to be able to see how Japanese descendants are reckoning with how they feel about the war and the bomb and everything else like that. It's Godzilla, right? Okay, get back to Dave Portago, though, right? There was not only that, but there was also like this concerted movement by the studio to push this guy, Gabriel Leone, as like a next. He's like, I kept seeing these things saying, "Oh, he's going to be the next big star," and I found him to be utterly uncharismatic.
Did he talk in the film? I don't remember him talking at all.
He smoked a lot of cigarettes. He smoked a lot. I was like, okay, he smells bad.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Dempsey shows up with white hair.
Yeah,
Dempsey's supposed to be old, and I'm like,
was he Sterling? He wasn't Sterling Moss. What was his character's name? I can't remember. It was the guy that won, right?
Yeah, he was the guy who won. It's like Muffy, Piero Toroffi. I don't like. I'm gonna get like banned. I used to date an Italian woman, and I would do this all the time, and that's why I don't date an Italian woman anymore. So, it's like old country. I don't know what to say. But it was almost like breaking the wall when I saw Dempsey. I thought Dempsey was actually really poorly cast, because I know that Dempsey's like a driver in real life, like driving is like his passion and stuff like that. But it just took me out of the moment, because like here is a sea of generally people who I don't recognize. Italian cinema, things like that.
Italians, yeah.
Right? And then there's fucking McDreamy right there on the road. Talking about how he needs an ashtray as he's driving his Ferrari up and down the 1,000 miles to wherever. So
yeah. I didn't get it. I mean, honestly, it's so hard, because I just feel like this movie had so much potential. And clearly, looking into it, this movie's like Michael Mann's wanted to make this movie since like 2000 or something like that. The script was written way back when, and the guy who wrote the script, I guess, died in like 2009. Like he's passed away for over a decade. And I think Adam, I do think they made the right casting decision with Penelope and Adam.
Yeah.
I thought he played an Italian very well, honestly, if I'm quite honest.
Well, again, he's probably the best of his generation. I mean, it's
Yeah.
gotta be, right?
But yeah, this is the hard part about it is this is Ferrari. But it's not a movie about cars. It's a movie about Enzo Ferrari. But I don't think you could make a movie without sort of doing more about the car and the company. And maybe that's just someone who likes motor racing speaking up there. Maybe I wanted more racing. Maybe I wanted more about the design of the car. I mean, they sort of talk about how, like, oh, he likes the engines. He cares about the engine, which we're back in a time when aerodynamics are just sort of coming online. But he's like, I don't care about that. The engine's what's important. And so you're like, okay, so which of these cars is special? Why is it special? How is it different from the last car? Did it beat the stopwatch? Like, what was the 1 minute 32? What? They're not racing around tracks. They're doing a 1,000-mile tour of Italy. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, can we talk about the recklessness of the Italian government to even allow this race to happen? Because apparently these are not the first deaths on this. This is a notoriously murderously...
Yeah, they said they lost like 5 people a year on average.
There are a lot of bastards who die in the course of the running of this race. I will say that getting back to it, actually one of my favorite parts of this film, though, was the scene in which Enzo Ferrari is sitting there with Piero, his son, his young child, and they're sitting there at the dining table, sketching out the engine, and they're kind of relating to one another about engines and things like that. I'm like, all right, cool. This is a humanizing thing. This is a guy who's like, I don't know how, so my sister died when she was young, right? And I don't know how as a parent, and I really struggled with this because I was like, yeah, my sister died, and then there was still my brother and me, right?
Sorry to hear that.
And thank you. And I've always said it should have been my brother who died. So for the fans, like, Jason's actually the bastard of this podcast. No, but my point is this. I really struggled with, like, after my sister died, I was always like, Mom, how come you can't move on? Because me and my brother are still here. Justin and I are still here, right? And, so forth. And then I became a parent, and I was like, oh, I get it. This would be crippling. So the loss that you see that Laura, Penelope Cruz's character, and Enzo are exhibiting is real. And, she's like, I gave him a son. She's like, no, I gave him a son.
Oh, I know. That was like, that was heartbreaking.
There are parts of this film that play between Enzo and Laura, which I think are the best parts of this movie.
Yeah.
And then we have a race.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I didn't mention it as my favorite parts of the movie, but those were the best. It was the best acting by far and away, and I really felt that sense of loss from her. And all she wanted, and it's so funny that she had such a pragmatic view. She's like, I gave you a son, but also she still supported him. When he needed that $500,000 to pay off journalists to stop them from murdering him in the paper, she used it, and that's
she clearly still loves him, at least in this film.
Yeah,
there's a weird. Even though he's betrayed her, he's had all of these mistresses at court. It's like Shailene Woodley's not the only woman. Only other woman. She's like, I told you, just keep them out. And like, I don't want to hear about them, right? I want to talk to you because we're talking about man trying to make this film, because I'm actually interested in the history of this film. Did you see who else had been in the developmental stages about playing Ferrari?
Oh, I don't remember.
All right. First name we get earlier on, years ago, Robert De Niro.
Ooh, that would have been good.
Yeah, maybe even better, right?
Yeah, especially because Robert De Niro almost has the look.
Like
he's got the look. Already. You don't have to do much costume.
He kind of looks like Enzo Ferrari a little bit, right? You could see him kind of putting on some weight and kind of the scowl, almost like Neil McCauley without the goatee, almost. All right, I got another name for you. All right, ready for your next one?
Yep.
This is gonna blow your mind. Christian Bale.
Whoa. Christian
Bale was attached to this.
I mean, look, Christian Bale's, speaking of best actors of someone's generation, I mean, Christian Bale, I can't visualize it if I'm honest, but if you also said Adam Driver before I watched this, I'd have been like, I don't know if that'll work. So I could definitely see Christian Bale, but certainly Robert De Niro would probably be at the top of my list.
I don't even know that you need to look per se like the person, so much as carry the spirit of the guy, right? Which is what Driver does. He doesn't really look like it. So there's one other name between Bale and Driver. Hugh Jackman.
Wow, that would have been interesting.
I don't know that Jackman's got the chops.
I guess I don't think I've seen him do that kind of acting. Give me an example. Give me a Hugh Jackman film that would have made him. Okay, I don't know if it's just me. Like maybe I'm just not thinking of it. I'm like, there's Wolverine. There's the other Wolverine. There's the Wolverine after that. I know that. There's Greatest Showman.
Did you see Australia?
No, I didn't.
Very. What's the word? Another lopsided film. I liked him in it. But as an early American historian, like the parallels between American and Australian history are so vivid that.
Was that with Nicole Kidman? I think I did see that back in the day. That's a while.
And now they've gone on and they've actually turned that into a series. They went back and redid the movie and turned it into a series in Australia now.
That'd be interesting.
Weird. It's fine, but I don't see Jackman as like Jackman. I don't see as doing this, and I like Jackman. I thought him as Logan. I think Logan's arguably the best. You can make the argument that Logan is the best superhero film ever made. It's really good.
Oh,
he's good now.
Wow, that's a bold statement. That's a bold statement. I like it though. I like it.
Yeah. So Driver came out really well, and so forth. All right. So the movie's real hit and miss, and I just. Let me ask you this. We keep talking about this in comparison to Ford versus Ferrari. What makes Ford versus Ferrari work that doesn't work for Ferrari?
There's one singular goal that everyone is working toward in Ford versus Ferrari. And I think that I thought when I started watching Ferrari that the goal was to win the Mille Miglia, right? I thought that's what it was. That's not really the story of Ferrari. The story of Ferrari is his relationship with Laura. It is his son. It is Mille Miglia is just sort of a thing that's happening as his company is struggling. It's not, it's such a clear thing to dumb Americans like myself. It's such a clear thing. I want to build a car that beats Ferrari in the Le Mans. Done. And then you have your good guys, your bad guys. You have your, and then of course Christian Bale's character is so important in Ford versus Ferrari because you have someone who sort of represents the car. The car is its own thing, but Christian Bale kind of is the car in itself. And Carroll Shelby is just kind of this sort of coaching along toward this goal. To me, that's what makes it a better movie. And of course, it's about the car. You get lots of racing, lots of really exciting racing, which I think provides a lot of great tension that you only get a little bit of in Ferrari.
Yeah, there's no logical conclusion to this film. This movie just kind of ends after the C plot, which turns out to be the Mille Miglia.
Right. It doesn't really matter that they won at all.
No.
The Mille Miglia, they end it after this. The race is no more. It's the last running. They don't set as a particularly good. Like I said, the Mercedes that ran in 1955 set the record that no one beat in 56 or 57 before the race was ended. And so it's not even a particularly standout car by any stretch of the imagination. And clearly we end as the brand is under attack, and his wife does sort of turn around and start supporting him, and that ends up sort of being the fulfilling plot, like you're saying. I mean, honestly, I watched it the day after New Year's, so we were all beat up from New Year's Eve, and my wife and my best friend slept through almost the whole thing, and I don't blame them. It just was slow, like you said, pacing, all that kind of stuff just didn't work out.
No resolution. I got to ask you about another thing, because you made a quip about it earlier. The special effects. You're talking about the flying through the air. Can we talk about the accident at the
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about both accidents, because I think the first accident, it's accurate. I'm sure that's what it looks like when a body is flying through the air, but it sure just looked goofy. And I saw, it's funny because before we even watched this movie, I saw a clip, I'm sure you might have seen it, it's sort of gone viral, of a journalist at one of the premieres asking Adam Driver about the VFX. And he's like, he tells him to fuck off or whatever. He's like, stupid question. It's pretty bad because then at the first crash, they have this guy driving around doing laps and something happens and the car flies and they show his body sort of flying out of the car. And it does what a body does, and it just sort of like, it just kind of looks
and does these weird things, yeah.
And it's weird, which is fine. Like that's
probably what a body. It's probably accurate,
right. Then at the end, so we have this big crash. As the crash was happening, I thought was really cool. Everything goes silent. You see the tire hit the thing and blow, and you have all these kids and people standing around, and then. After the crash happens, they sort of pan over and you can see like body parts and you can see the driver's head just sitting there. And it all looks really fake. And so my thing is like, first off, I think, and someone could argue with me, Michael Mann, probably going to argue with me on this. I don't think you necessarily need to show the body parts. I don't think you need to. I think people get it. But also, if you're going to show the body parts, which I'm good, like I study plane crashes for a living. This is something that I have to get used to seeing. If you're going to show it, like work with like a horror movie VFX person to like put together real, like, like more realistic looking body parts. Like if you're going to throw gore in there, gore it up. There's no reason in sort of making a half computer generated version of it that didn't look great to me.
That head at the second crash during the Mille Miglia, there was was it the driver's head? I don't know if it was the kid or the what. It was kind of mushy and blob looking. When I saw it, was like, it looked like a blob, like a jellyfish. It just, it did. And the slowing down, you're right. Like I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know this thing was going to end in this crash. So they're like, oh, let's keep the tires. I'm like, bold choice. Go for it. And I'm thinking they're going to win. I'm like, they're going to win. This is great. Like a Days of Thunder. Tires. Okay. Robert Duvall. Got it. And then we'll get back to Days of Thunder in a second. And then the thing, okay, I get the slowing down to show, because the whole trial afterwards is dependent upon demonstrating that tire got ripped open by debris in the road, right?
That's right. That's right.
And that's how we still, because if that doesn't happen, we don't have Ferrari to this day.
Yep.
Right. Yep. The company would be gone.
Probably. I mean, think about it. It did happen to Mercedes too, and we do still have Mercedes. So you never know.
That's fair.
To me, once you know the Mercedes story, the stakes feel a lot lower in the Ferrari story. Sorry, continue.
Yeah,
it looked like a cartoon, honestly. That like, there's of course I don't know. I'm no CGI expert, but it just looked like cartoonish. And to me, that's like I said, like if you're gonna go all the way, go all the way. Like I know these people that do Walking Dead could have made some amazing looking globby heads on the ground. Like it looked, you could because again it's kind of nighttime, right? Like it's like nighttime when they show it, and it just doesn't match up, and it looks like a cartoon.
All right, can we talk? You brought up the nighttime thing, and here was my thought as you're driving it. Because now I'm of the age, I'm 46, and now I have become the guy who drives a little slower at night. I don't. I'm like, they're going too fast at night. They might hit a deer. It's like, that's also being from Kentucky. I was like, well, what if something comes out there? Because they're talking about, they make these references to like stuff like them running over dogs and whatever, just in the Italian countryside, children.
Oh yeah.
So it was a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, no, I definitely agree about that, and I mean just how unsafe, like insanely unsafe this was. I mean, think about kind of the gall you had to have to be a driver for this, and to what end almost, like, I don't know.
Or to be a navigator. These guys have somebody sit in that accident. The driver and the guy next to him died. Like there's a whole other person who's just sitting there holding on, spewing Italian curse words, I'm sure.
And Jason, what was the navigator's name? What was the navigator's name?
No one knows, right? Do you know?
No one knows. He's just a random guy that died. I guess not part of the plot.
It's Enzo Morte is what his name. It's like, I don't know, right? All right, so this movie is a real pass. Neither of us I was disappointed. It was okay. You didn't like it at all.
No, I didn't like it at all, and I don't want that to have been like, okay, I don't think we should make more racing movies. I mean, obviously there's a big Brad Pitt movie that's coming out that's like real formula. It's all Formula One, and everyone's very excited about that. But this definitely is not a racing movie, in my opinion. If you say, oh, what are the best racing movies of all time? It's kind of like as much racing as Die Hard is Christmas. It's not much.
All right. So give me 3 racing movies. If I were going to say, but Colin, I want to learn more about the art of the wheel. What are my racing movies? If you got 3, do you have 3 racing movies you like?
No, I don't even have three racing movies. Ford versus Ferrari is the absolute thing that you have to watch, I think. If you love racing, I think, and it's not a movie, but you have to watch Drive to Survive on Netflix. Like you have to do it. No matter what. In terms of, racing movies from growing up, Talladega Nights is absolutely one of my favorites.
Yeah. It's so much fun.
There's not a whole lot else that are like in my favorites that are racing movies.
You gotta talk about Days of Thunder. You got to.
I mean, it's there, and it's
there.
Just it wasn't like I did not watch that movie till later in life. It's just not something that felt special to me.
It's the first sequel to Top Gun. It was. It's like it was.
That's fair. That's
Don
fair.
Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer doing piles of coke on the sideline. Here's what I find fascinating about Days of Thunder. Because this Days of Thunder comes out, I think, 90-ish, 91. A couple things that I still remember: the Mellow Yellow campaign, the marketing campaign to get Mellow Yellow and everything, right? And if you go back and watch it, here's what's fascinating: the idea they form a team. There's all of a sudden now you're gonna have 2 racers on the same team, which is now common, right, in NASCAR. Yeah. Which this is they were ahead of the curve here. I do have I've got a dark horse racing film for you.
Oh, let's hear
for your Indiana roots. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Breaking Away.
Oh, I don't know this.
The bicycle movie. Did you never see Breaking Away? The where they're actually training for this is like comes out in 81. It's about guys who are riding bicycles who are training for the Tour de France. Oh, that's your Indiana movie, man. It's so good.
I don't think you're going to invite me back on the pod now. I don't know that one, man.
You're watching pirates and bikers and bicyclists. So
I put it on my list. Putting it on my list.
I bet. All right, Colin, you got final words here on Ferrari?
Final words. I would say don't watch the movie, but go watch Drive to Survive. Become a Formula One fan and join Sarah and I and other great historians. Ryan Wadley, give him a shout out. He's a big motor racing guy. Watching Formula One on Sundays. Join us.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much for being here and doing this. This was a lot of fun over a really meh movie.
I know. Let's do Sahara next, and we can talk about the book versus the movie because I have so many opinions on that.
Whenever you want to do Sahara, I am so 1,000% down on Sahara. I can't even tell you. So we're gonna jump into that. So awesome.
Excellent.
And that's a wrap here at Historians of the Movies podcast. Thank you so much to our guest, Colin Colbourn, for joining in with us today. Guys, I recorded the intro and outro to this thing about 67 times. It's always the hardest part for me. I don't know why I struggle with it so much, but thank you so much for being here, Colin. Thank you to our intrepid producer, Fletcher of Howell, for being here and being part of this show. And thank you, of course, for you guys for continuing to come back, sharing this show with everyone, getting the word out, helping us to build HATM into something bigger and better and brighter. And we could not do this without you. So thank you so very much for being here. Let me know if there are films that you want on the podcast. And let me know if there are scholars you want on this podcast. We'll continue to put those out. And thank you so much. Ciao for now. Bye.